Hi there, thrill seekers, history fanatics, and anyone currently regretting their life choices. Tonight, we slip into the muddy, candle-lit, and frankly questionably scented world of a medieval village, specifically a tiny, bustling hamlet in rural Europe. And guess what? You're a young woman about to face the most daunting, hilarious, and utterly non-romantic night of your life. Your wedding night. Picture yourself standing in a cramped, thatch-roofed cottage. The air is so thick with the scent of damp wool and smoky tallow candles, you could probably cut it with a dull butter knife. Outside, the village hums with a delightful mix of chatter, animal noises, and the occasional drunken shout, and you can't shake the feeling that everyone's talking about you. Your stomach churns like a churn full of curdled milk as you adjust a scratchy linen shift. This is your best garment, by the way, though it's charmingly patched at the elbows. This isn't the fairy tale wedding of modern dreams, no. There are no Pinterest boards, no floral arrangements, and definitely no first look with a dreamy groom. Oh no, you probably won't survive this without a few awkward moments that'll haunt you for the rest of your blissfully short medieval life. So, before you get too comfortable in your modern, temperature-controlled abode, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, or if you're currently wearing a scratchy linen shift and need solidarity. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'd absolutely love to know where you're drifting off to this glorious medieval madness from. Especially if you're somewhere cool like Sigurdswara, where it probably smells a lot better than a medieval village. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum that totally isn't simulating the buzzing of flies. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in the heart of your village, a charming cluster of wobbly mud and wattle houses huddled around a rutted dirt path. It's late spring, and the air carries the faint, sweet promise of blooming hawthorn, though it's tragically undercut by the ever-present eye-watering stench of the nearby midden heap. Your wedding is tomorrow, and the village is already buzzing like a hive of slightly drunk, over-caffeinated bees. You catch snippets of conversation as you haul a bucket of water from the well, your arms aching. "She's marrying the miller's son, lucky girl," one woman mutters, barely bothering to lower her voice. Another snorts. "Lucky. He's got a temper and a wandering eye, I hear." You try to ignore them, but their words cling to your skirts like damp, stubborn straw. This is no private affair, oh no. Your wedding night, bless its little heart, is the village's primetime entertainment, and you, my dear, are the unwitting, unscripted star in a drama no one asked for. In medieval Europe, marriage was less about breathless romance and more about practical survival, alliances, land, and labour. Historians note that by the 13th century the Catholic Church, in a surprising move for an institution known for not being fun, had tightened its grip on matrimony, declaring it a sacrament, which meant your wedding wasn't just a party, it was a sacred, ironclad contract. You're not marrying for a sparkly ring or a Pinterest-perfect wedding photo. You're tying your family's meagre fortunes to another's, and everyone's watching to see if you'll fumble the knot. A historical note: some villagers believed a bride who tripped on her way to the church was cursed with bad luck, probably meaning she'd spill the ale. So you're hyper-aware of every treacherous pebble underfoot. Historians still argue whether this superstition was widespread or just a regional quirk. But you're not taking chances. No tripping for you. Your future depends on it. You pause by the well, the wooden bucket heavy in your hands, and glance at your reflection in the murky water. Your face is flushed from the day's chores, milking the cow, who's surprisingly judgmental, kneading dough, which talks back sometimes, and expertly dodging your mother's endless, unsolicited advice about wifely duties. The village is tiny, maybe 200 souls, and privacy. That's a delightful fantasy. You share your cramped cottage with your parents, 2 younger siblings, and a particularly grumpy goat who insists on sleeping on your straw mattress. The very idea of your wedding night being intimate feels like a cruel, elaborate joke. You overhear a gaggle of older women cackling about the bedding ceremony. Yes, that's a thing, and it's as intrusive as it sounds. They'll literally escort you and your new husband to the marriage bed. You're already dreading their lewd jokes, which will undoubtedly be delivered at top volume. Let's be real, you're exhausted. You've been up since dawn. and the sun's barely dipped below the horizon. Your hands are rough from spinning wool, and your back aches from hauling enough firewood to fuel a small inferno. Yet, the village expects you to be a blushing bride, radiant and ready for a night that's more about duty than desire. You can't help but smirk, thinking how modern folks would absolutely lose their minds if their wedding included a public inspection of the bed sheets. Spoiler alert, that's coming. And no, it's not as romantic as it sounds. For now, you trudge back to the cottage, water sloshing in the bucket, and try to tune out the village's relentless gossip. They're probably betting on whether you'll cry tomorrow or manage a brave face. As you step inside, your mother's already fussing, piling more tasks on you before the big day. She's muttering about the dowry, a few scrawny chickens, a bolt of coarse cloth, and a frankly wobbly stool your father carved. You're not nobility, sadly. This isn't a Game of Thrones-style union with gold and knights. You're a peasant, and your marriage is a practical deal to keep the village's tangled web of obligations intact. Still, there's a flicker of nervous excitement beneath your dread. Maybe, just maybe, this new life won't be as grim as the rumours suggest. But then you hear a neighbour shout something about the groom's drinking habits, and your heart sinks faster than a stone in a well. Welcome to the medieval marriage game, where the stakes are high and the wine is definitely watered down. You're back in your family's cottage. The air is heavy with the comforting, or not so comforting scent of boiled cabbage, and the faint tang of sweat-soaked wool. The fire crackles weakly, casting dancing shadows on the rough walls, and you're perched precariously on a stool, trying to mend a tear in your shift while your mother drones on about tomorrow's wedding. Your mind, though, is elsewhere. Specifically on the fact that this marriage was decided when you were barely old enough to chase chickens. You're not stepping into this union out of some grand romance, no. You're here because a deal was struck years ago, and you're just now catching up to its consequences. The village chatter from earlier, remember that well-side gossip, still stings. But now you're piecing together just how little choice you had in this whole affair. In medieval times, betrothals were often arranged when children were ridiculously young, sometimes even infants, to secure crucial alliances or property. By the 14th century, canon law, in its infinite wisdom, required both parties to consent at the altar. But let's be honest, saying no wasn't exactly an option when your family's very survival hinged on the match. You're 16, maybe 17, and the miller's son, your soon-to-be husband, was chosen because his family owns a convenient strip of land right next to yours. It's not love, it's logistics. An interesting custom. Some betrothals included a hand-fasting ritual, where you'd clasp hands through a hole in a stone to seal the deal. You didn't get that quaint ceremony, but the weight of the agreement feels like a massive, unmovable stone on your chest anyway. Historians still argue whether hand-fasting was legally binding or just symbolic, but for you, it's all the same. You're bound. You set the needle down, your fingers sore from stitching, and glance at your younger sister, who's sprawled on a pallet, blissfully oblivious to the storm brewing in your head. She's lucky. She's got a few years before her own betrothal comes knocking. You, on the other hand, are staring down the barrel of a life you didn't choose. Your mother's still talking. Something about how the miller's son is sturdy enough, which, you realise, is medieval code for he's not dead yet. You bite back a laugh. Joke number one, if sturdy is the best compliment he's getting, you're in for a thrilling marriage. The truth is you've barely spoken to him. He's a blurry figure in your mind, all flour-dusted hands and a generic grunt when you pass him at the market. The cottage door creaks open and your father stomps in, tracking mud across the packed dirt floor. He's been at the alehouse negotiating with the groom's family, and his red face tells you it wasn't all friendly banter. Betrothals like yours often came with tense haggling. Land, tools, or even a particularly plump pig could tip the scales. You're not just marrying a man, you're merging two households, and every excruciating detail had to be ironed out before the priest got involved. You catch your father muttering about the miller's stingy offer, and your stomach twists. If they're already fighting, what's your actual wedding night going to feel like? You're not naive. You know this night isn't about candles and sweet nothings. It's about sealing the deal, and the village expects proof. You stand, stretching your aching back, and step outside for a moment of blessed air. The night is cool, stars pricking the inky sky, but the village isn't asleep. You hear raucous laughter from the alehouse, a dog barking, and the distant clink of a blacksmith still at work. This place never really quiets down, and neither does your mind. You think about the stories you've heard, whispers of brides who cried through their wedding nights, or worse, ones who didn't make it through childbirth a year later. You're not sure what scares you more, the night itself or the life that follows. Joke number 2. At least if the groom's drunk tomorrow, he might fall asleep before you have to deal with him. Your mother calls you back inside, her voice sharp with impatience. She's holding a comb, ready to attack the tangles in your hair, as if that'll magically make you a proper bride. You sit, wincing as she tugs, and try to focus on the fire's dying glow. The betrothal's terms are settled, a few meagre coins and your lifelong labour as a wife. You're not just gaining a husband, you're losing the sliver of freedom you had as a daughter. The church might call this a sacred union, but to you it feels suspiciously like a contract written in someone else's hand. Tomorrow, you'll walk to the church, and the entire village will watch your every single step. For now, you're just a girl in a cramped cottage, wondering how you ended up here. You're back in the cottage. The fire is now a dull glow, like a sleepy dragon's eye, and your mother's comb is still waging war on your hair. The air feels thicker, not just from the lingering smoke, but from the palpable weight of what's coming. Yesterday's relentless village gossip and last night's sudden stomach-dropping realization about your betrothal, remember that stone on your chest feeling, have left you restless. Now, as a sliver of weak dawn creeps through the cracks in the shutters, you're caught up in the next glorious piece of this medieval marriage puzzle, the dowry. Your family's been haggling over it for weeks, and you're starting to feel less like a blushing bride and more like a bundle of slightly used goods being bartered. You sit cross-legged on the floor, sorting through a pile of scratchy linens your mother insists are part of the deal, while your father paces, muttering darkly about the miller's latest outrageous demands. In medieval Europe, a dowry was the bride's contribution to the marriage, often a mix of practical items, cloth, pots, livestock, ideally living, and sometimes land or coin. By the 13th century, it was a cornerstone of marriage negotiations, especially for families like yours, scraping by in a village where wealth meant an extra goat. Your dowry isn't exactly glamorous. A few scrawny chickens, a patched blanket, hand-stitched naturally, and that wobbly stool your father keeps boasting about. A noteworthy tradition. Some dowries even included bedding rights, meaning your family promised the groom a share of your household's straw mattress. Talk about medieval luxury. Historians still argue whether dowries empowered women by giving them leverage or just turned them into bargaining chips. But as your father snaps at you to fold the linens faster, you're definitely leaning toward the latter. You glance at the pile, your hands moving mechanically. Each item feels like a piece of your old life being traded away. The chickens? They're the ones you fed since you were a kid, clucking at you every morning. The blanket? You helped your mother weave it during a winter so cold your fingers bled. You're not just bringing stuff to this marriage, you're bringing your family's very survival, and the Miller's family knows it. You overhear your father grumble about their demand for an extra bushel of barley, and you can't help but smirk. Joke number 1. If they're this picky about grain, imagine how they'll judge your cooking. The truth is, these negotiations are a brutal power play, and you're the prize. Nobody asked if you wanted to be one. Your mother, sensing your distraction, or perhaps the impending rebellion in your eyes, hands you a small iron pot, another dowry item, and tells you to scrub it clean. You dunk it in a bucket of cold water, the chill biting your knuckles, and try to focus. The village outside is waking up. You hear the creak of a cart, the bleat of a sheep, and the distant, solemn clang of the church bell signalling morning prayers. The dowry talks aren't just about you, they're about keeping the village's delicate social balance intact. If your family gives too much, they'll starve come winter. If they give too little, the miller might call off the wedding, and you'll be stuck, a spinster at 17, which is basically a death sentence in a world where marriage means security. You pause, the pot dripping in your hands, and think about the groom. You've seen him at the mill, his face smudged with flour, but you don't know him. Is he kind, cruel, indifferent? Does he even want this marriage? Or is he just following his father's orders? like a particularly grumpy sheep. The dowry makes you feel like a transaction, and you wonder if he feels the same. Joke number 2. Maybe you should have negotiated for a better groom instead of an extra chicken. Your mother catches your frown and snaps that you're lucky to marry at all. Plenty of girls end up with worse. She's not wrong, but it doesn't make the knot in your stomach loosen as you scrub the pot with a vengeance. Your father slams his hand on the table, startling your sister, who's been dozing by the fire. He's furious. The Miller's family wants a share of your family's meadow, a strip of land you've grazed cows on forever. You freeze, realizing this isn't just about chickens anymore. That meadow is your family's lifeline, and giving it up could mean lean years ahead. You're not just carrying a dowry into this marriage, you're carrying your family's future. The village will talk if the deal falls through, and you'll be the girl who couldn't seal the bargain. You set the pot down, your hands trembling, and try to imagine the wedding day. It's tomorrow, and the dowry's still not settled. Welcome to the medieval marriage market, where love's the last thing on anyone's mind. You're standing outside the cottage, the morning sun barely warming the damp air as your mother drags you toward a rickety tub of lukewarm, vaguely murky water behind a flimsy screen of woven branches. The dowry haggling, remember that meadow your father nearly lost, is still unresolved. But today's the wedding, and there's no time to dwell. Your stomach's in knots, not just from nerves, but from the meagre, lumpy porridge you choke down at dawn. Now you're being scrubbed like a tarnished pot, your mother's hands relentless with a coarse cloth. This is the start of your bridal preparations, and it's less about beauty and more about making you vaguely presentable for the village's endlessly prying eyes. You wince as she tugs at your hair, muttering about how you should have taken better care of it. In medieval Europe, bridal preparations were practical, not glamorous, especially for peasants like you. By the 14th century, a bride was expected to look clean and modest, signalling her family's respectability. You're not getting a spa day, you're getting a quick dunk and a borrowed dress. An intriguing belief. Some villages believed washing a bride's feet brought fertility. So your mother's splashing water on your toes with a zeal that's frankly alarming, considering the temperature. Historians still argue whether this foot washing was a widespread custom or just a quirky local tradition, but you're too cold to care. You just want this over with. The water's gritty, probably from the same well you hauled buckets from yesterday, and you're shivering in your thin shift. Your mother hands you a dress, a hand-me-down from your cousin's wedding, dyed a faded blue that's definitely seen better days. It's the best your family can do, and you're grateful, truly. But it itches against your skin, the wool heavy and stiff. You slip it on, trying not to snag the loose threads, and catch a glimpse of yourself in a polished copper plate your mother's propped up. You look fine, you suppose, but the girl staring back feels like a stranger. Joke number 1. If this dress is your glow, you're ready to glow right back to bed. The village expects you to look the part, though, so you stand straighter, even as your bare feet squelch in the mud. The air buzzes with activity now. You hear neighbours shouting, children running wild, and the distant lowing of cows being herded to pasture. Your mother's not done. She's now weaving a crown of wild flowers into your hair, the stems pricking your scalp. It's tradition, she says, to ward off evil spirits, but you suspect it's mostly just to distract from the dress's frayed hem. You're starting to feel less like a bride and more like a prop in a play you didn't audition for. Your sister, lingering nearby, giggles and says you look like a saint from the church fresco. You roll your eyes. Joke number 2. If saints had to wear this dress, they'd have rebelled a lot sooner. But her laughter's a small comfort, a fleeting reminder of the life you're leaving behind. Your mother steps back, appraising you like a merchant sizing up a cart of turnips. She adjusts the flower crown, then hands you a pair of worn leather shoes, another dowry item your father grudgingly included. They're a bit tight, but you're not walking barefoot to the church. That's a bad omen, and you're already dodging enough of those. The village is waking up fully now, and you catch snippets of chatter through the screen. "She's not bad-looking," one man says, while a woman snips. "Hope she's tougher than she seems." You clench your fists, wishing you could disappear into a puff of smoke. This isn't just your wedding, it's the village's spectacle, and you're the main act. As you step out from behind the screen, your mother starts listing instructions. Keep your head down during the ceremony. Don't trip on the church steps, and for heaven's sake, don't talk back to the priest. You nod, half listening, your mind drifting to the groom. You still haven't seen him today, and the uncertainty gnaws at you. Will he be kind, drunk, indifferent? The preparations are supposed to make you feel ready, but they're just amplifying your dread. Joke number 3. Maybe if you scrubbed hard enough, you could wash away the whole wedding. For now, you follow your mother back to the cottage, the dress dragging in the dirt as the villagers' eyes follow your every step. The church bells are ringing, a solemn, inescapable sound, and there's truly no turning back. You're trudging through the village, the itchy blue dress, remember that hand-me-down from your cousin, clinging to your legs as you follow your mother toward the open field, where the wedding feast is already spiralling gloriously into chaos. The church bells from earlier are still echoing in your head, but now they're drowned out by the roar of laughter, shouting, and the off-key wail of a fiddle. Your flower crown's starting to wilt, one pathetic petal dangling over your eyebrow, and your too tight shoes pinch with every miserable step. The bridal preparations left you feeling like a polished trinket, but now you're being tossed into the heart of the village's rowdiest event. This is the communal feast, and it's less a celebration and more a test of your endurance. In medieval Europe, wedding feasts were a big deal, especially for peasants, doubling as a community bonding ritual, and a rare chance to eat something other than stale bread. By the 14th century, these feasts were often held outdoors, with everyone pitching in food or ale to keep costs down. Your family scraped together a meagre spread of barley stew, roasted turnips, and a slightly tough pig your uncle swears was fresh yesterday. A curious custom. Some villagers believed spilling ale during the feast brought good luck. So you're dodging sticky puddles as you weave through the jostling crowd, wondering if this was a genuine superstition or just an elaborate excuse to get sloppily drunk. The evidence around you leans heavily toward the latter. You clutch a wooden cup of watered-down ale your mother thrust into your hands. The bitter taste does little to calm your jangling nerves. The field is a sea of faces. Neighbours, cousins, strangers from the next village, all red-cheeked and loud. You spot your father, predictably, arguing with the miller, probably still bickering over that dowry meadow. The groom's somewhere in this messy throng, but you haven't seen him yet, and you're not sure you want to. You're supposed to be the radiant bride, but you feel more like a sheep being herded toward a market stall. Joke number 1. If this is a feast, you'd hate to see their famine. A group of older women, their aprons stained with grease, pull you toward a rickety table piled with food. They're cackling, offering you a hunk of bread, and teasing about how you'll need strength for tonight. You blush, wishing the ground would swallow you whole. The village's obsession with your wedding night, those well-side whispers, is in full, terrifying force, and their jokes are about as subtle as a cow in a chapel. You take a bite of the bread, dry and chewy, and try to force a smile. The air smells of smoke, sweat, and roasted meat, and the fiddle player is now inexplicably dueling with a drunken piper, the discordant noise making your head throb. You manage to slip away for a moment of quiet, leaning against a gnarled oak tree at the edge of the crowd. From here, you can see the whole chaotic scene. Children chasing a stray dog, men arm wrestling over a barrel of ale, women gossiping in tight conspiratorial clusters. This feast isn't just about you, it's the village flexing its unity, showing off its ability to throw a party despite lean times. But it's also a stark reminder of how little privacy you have. You overhear a man bet a sack of oats that you'll do your duty tonight, and you grip your cup tighter, tempted to fling it at him. Joke number 2. Maybe you should have negotiated a dowry clause for some actual peace and quiet. Your mother spots you and waves you back, her face a mix of pride and exasperation. She's in her element, bustling between tables, making sure the stew doesn't run out. You're expected to mingle, to play the blushing bride, but every step feels like wading through thick mud. You pass a group of young men, one of whom winks and says you're lucky to get the miller's boy. You force a smile, but inside you're screaming. The groom's still a mystery, and the feast's chaos isn't helping. You finally spot him across the field, surrounded by his boisterous brothers laughing with a tankard in hand. He looks fine, you guess, but your heart doesn't leap, it sinks. You're pulled back into the crowd. Someone shoves a greasy slice of pork into your hands, and you eat it mechanically, the fat slick on your fingers. The feast is a blur of noise and faces, and you're counting the hours until you can escape. But escape to what? The church ceremony is next, and after that, the bedding ritual you've been dreading with every fibre of your being. Joke number 3. If the feast is this wild, the wedding night might just be a riot. For now, you let the crowd carry you, the ale loosening your nerves just enough to keep moving forward. You're stumbling away from the feast, your belly full of tough pork and sour ale, the villagers' raucous laughter still ringing in your ears like a persistent cowbell. The field, remember that chaotic scene with the fiddler and spilled ale, is behind you now, and you're being herded toward the church, your flower crown lopsided, your dress speckled with stew. The air's cooler as the sun dips, casting long, eerie shadows over the rutted dirt path. Your mother's gripping your arm, steering you like a wayward goat, while your father trails behind, still grumbling about the miller's latest dowry demands. The wedding ceremony's about to start, and you're bracing for the priest's stern words, which everyone says will make your knees wobble. You're not sure if it's the ale or the sheer dread, but your legs already feel unsteady. In medieval Europe, the church held iron control over marriage, especially by the 13th century, when it was declared a sacrament binding you to your husband and God's increasingly complex rules for life. The priest's role wasn't just to bless the union, but to lecture you on its sacred duties, often with a tone that could curdle milk. You're expected to stand before the altar, head bowed, and promise obedience, chastity, and a lifetime of popping out airs, a religious custom. Some priests actually sprinkled holy water on the bride's head to cleanse her of sinful thoughts. Good luck with that, considering the villagers' feast jokes. Historians still argue whether these rituals were meant to sanctify or just intimidate, but as you approach the church's ancient stone steps, intimidation's definitely winning. The church looms ahead, its wooden door creaking ominously as villagers pour in, their muddy boots scuffing the floor. You pause at the threshold, the air inside heavy with incense and damp stone. The priest, a gaunt man with a beard like a bramble patch, fixes you with a stare that says he's seen too many weddings go wrong. He's holding a worn prayer book, its pages curling with age, and you can already hear his voice, low and gravelly, droning about sin. Your mother nudges you forward, whispering to, "Keep your eyes down." Joke number 1, if you look up, you might accidentally challenge God and the groom in one go. You shuffle to the altar, the crowd's murmurs buzzing like a swarm of flies. The priest begins. His Latin words are a blur, but you catch the gist. Marriage is your duty, a holy cage you're locking yourself into. He's not talking to you, really. He's addressing the groom who's standing a few feet away, smelling faintly of flour and stale ale. You steal a glance. His face is flushed, his tunic rumpled, but he's not running. So that's something. The priest's lecture shifts to dire warnings. No adultery, no defiance, and definitely no skipping church. You bite your lip to keep from smirking. Joke number 2. If skipping church was a sin, half the village would be doomed. But the weight of his words lands hard. This isn't just a ceremony. It's a contract you can't break. You're handed a ring, a simple iron band, cold and heavy against your finger. It's not a symbol of love, you realise, but of ownership, and the priest makes sure you know it. He's now preaching about Eve's fall, about how women must submit to avoid her fate. You're tempted to roll your eyes, but the crowd's watching, and your mother's glare could pierce armour. The church's rules are clear. Your body, your labour, your future. They belong to your husband. Now, you think back to the feast, how the villagers' eyes followed you, and realise this ceremony is just another stage for their scrutiny. The priest's voice rises, and you flinch as he sprinkles that holy water, cold of course, on your head. The ceremony drags on. Your feet ache in those tight shoes, and the incense is making you dizzy. The groom mutters his vows, barely audible, and you echo yours. your voice a whisper. The priest's final warning is about the wedding night. It's your duty to fulfill the marriage debt, a phrase that makes your stomach lurch. Joke number 3. If this is a debt, you'd rather owe the miller a sack of grain. The crowd cheers as the priest declares you wed, but you feel more trapped than triumphant. You step outside, the evening air a blessed relief. But the next ordeal's already looming, the bedding ceremony. For now, you cling to the rough iron ring on your finger, wondering what exactly you've just promised. You're stepping out of the church. The priest's heavy words. Remember that marriage debt warning? Still ringing in your ears like a persistent cowbell. The evening air is crisp, cutting through the thick fog of incense and sweat from the ceremony. But there's no time to catch your breath. The village crowd, half drunk from the feast, is surging around you, their cheers more rowdy than reverent. Your new husband, still a flower-dusted stranger, walks beside you, his shoulder brushing yours awkwardly. Your mother's fussing with your wilted flower crown, but her eyes are already darting toward the path leading to the miller's house. That's where the bedding ceremony awaits, and the very thought makes your skin prickle with dread. You're not just a bride now. You're the main event in a ritual that's about to get far too personal. In medieval Europe, the bedding ceremony was a common, rather unglamorous tradition, especially among peasants, where the couple was literally escorted to the marriage bed by a gaggle of enthusiastic relatives and neighbours. By the 14th century, it was less about romance and more about proving the marriage was consummated to secure the alliance. Your dowry meadow and those chickens quite literally depend on it. A particular practice. Some villagers would hang a sheet outside the next morning to show the bride's purity, a custom as invasive as it sounds. Historians still argue whether this was universal or varied by region, but right now, you're just praying your village skips the sheet part. The crowd's boisterous laughter tells you they're ready for a show. You're being steered down the path, the ground uneven under your pinching shoes. Torches flicker, casting jagged dancing shadows, and the air smells of burning pitch and spilled ale. The groom's mother, a stout woman with a voice like a crow, is leading the charge, shouting for everyone to keep up. You catch her eyeing you, as if sizing up whether you're truly worth the barley her family demanded. Your own mother's whispering last-minute advice, something about lying still and praying, but it's drowned out by a group of men singing a particularly bawdy song about a farmer and his plough. You blush, wishing you could simply bolt. Joke number 1. If this is a plough song, you're ready to plant yourself in a different village. The miller's house looms ahead, its thatched roof sagging like a tired brow. You've been here before, fetching flour, but now it feels like a foreign, hostile land. The crowd's pressing closer, their breath hot with ale and excitement. You glance at your husband. He's staring straight ahead, his jaw tight, and you wonder if he's as nervous as you are. Nobody's asked either of you what you want. This ceremony, you realise with a pang, is for the village, not for you. You think back to the priest's lecture about duty and try to steady your breathing. The bedding ritual's purpose is to ensure the marriage is complete, but it feels less like a union and more like a public trial. And you're the evidence. You step inside the house, dim and smoky, with a low ceiling that makes you instinctively duck. The marriage bed, really just a straw mattress on a creaky frame, sits sadly in the corner, draped with a threadbare blanket. The crowd piles in, ignoring any pretense of personal space. Your sister's there, wide-eyed, probably thrilled to witness something she's too young to understand. The groom's brothers are cracking crude jokes, one of them waving a jug of ale like a trophy. You want to scream, but instead, you force a smile. Joke number 2. If smiling through this is a skill, you're ready for immediate sainthood. The older women start chanting something vaguely about fertility, and you grip the iron ring on your finger, its weight a small, cold anchor in the escalating chaos. The bedding ceremony's rules are unspoken but crystal clear. You and the groom are expected to climb into bed while the crowd watches, offering praise or heckles depending on their mood and sobriety. You're not sure what's worse, their presence or the intense pressure to perform. Your mother-in-law shoves a cup of spiced wine into your hand, saying it'll help things along. You take a sip, the cloves bitter on your tongue, and try to ignore the man in the back shouting about getting to the good part. Joke number 3. If this is the good part, you'd rather skip straight to the epilogue. For now, you stand frozen, the bed looming like a stage, as the entire village waits for you to play your reluctant role in this medieval spectacle. You're standing in the miller's house, the smoky air pressing against you like a heavy, ill-fitting cloak, and the bedding ceremony, remember that intrusive crowd from moments ago, is in full, mortifying swing. The straw mattress in the corner, your sacred marriage bed, looks about as inviting as a pile of damp hay. Your husband's beside you, his breath sharp with ale, and the village mob is packed into the room, their torchlight flickering across the rough walls. Your flower crown's long gone, probably trampled at the feast, and your dress feels like a sack of regrets. You're clutching that spiced wine your mother-in-law gave you, its warmth doing little to thaw the profound chill in your bones. This is the bedchamber, and it's anything but romantic, more like a cramped, very public stage for the village's nosiest performance yet. In medieval Europe, the bedchamber during a wedding was less a private sanctuary and more a public checkpoint, especially for peasants. It was crucial for securing alliances, like your dowry meadow and those precious chickens. By the 14th century, the bedding ceremony often involved the couple being ushered to bed with witnesses, ensuring no funny business, like an annulment, could undo the deal. A historical nuance. Some bedchambers were sprinkled with fragrant herbs like lavender to encourage the couple, though the combined stench of unwashed villagers, stale ale, and general anxiety probably overpowered any floral vibes. Historians still argue whether these herbs were for luck or just to mask the room's general funk, but you're too distracted to notice any scent beyond sweat and smoke. You take a shaky step toward the bed, the crowd's chatter swelling. Your mother-in-law's barking orders telling everyone to make room, though nobody's listening. Your husband's brothers are still at it, one of them sloshing ale as he toasts to a fruitful night. You want to gag. Joke number 1. If this is fruitful, you'd rather plant turnips. Your mother's hovering near the door, her face a mix of worry and resignation, and you catch your sister's wide eyes soaking up the chaos like it's a particularly exciting puppet show. The groom's father claps his son on the back, a thump that makes the new husband wince. More drunken well-wishes are shouted. You try to remember the priest's words about marriage being a sacred duty, but it's hard to feel sacred with this many witnesses. The moment stretches, thick with anticipation. The women, in a sudden burst of energy, start chanting again, their voices surprisingly loud, something about blessings for the womb. Your face burns. You can practically feel every eye in the room on you, waiting for the performance to begin. You glance at your husband again. His eyes meet yours for a fleeting second, and you see a flicker of something. Panic? Shared misery? It's hard to tell through the ale-induced haze. Then with a final booming cheer, the older women physically shove you and the groom toward the straw mattress. You stumble onto the saggy surface, which immediately crinkles and rustles like a pile of dry leaves. It smells vaguely of old straw and unidentifiable animal droppings. The threadbare blanket feels rough against your skin. You try to arrange yourself modestly, but it's impossible with the crowd practically breathing down your necks. The groom awkwardly sits beside you, pulling the blanket up to his chin. He looks profoundly uncomfortable. The room is still packed. No one is leaving. This isn't a hint to get started. This is the beginning of the actual ceremony. The older women, with triumphant expressions, start to pull back the blanket, making sure everyone can see you are indeed in the bed. They want proof of presence, if not immediate progress. A traditional element. Sometimes the witnesses would literally tuck in the couple, sometimes even pulling off their stockings as a symbol of the act. You silently pray they skip the stockings. The air thickens with crude jokes and knowing winks. "Get to it, lad," someone shouts. Another woman cackles. "Don't disappoint the village, girl." You close your eyes, wishing for the sweet oblivion of sleep, or perhaps a sudden, miraculous meteor strike. Joke number 2. If this is encouragement, you're ready for a career as a hermit. The groom shifts beside you, his elbow poking you. You can feel his nerves radiating off him. This isn't just awkward for you, it's awkward for both of you under the intense public glare. Your mother-in-law, still a formidable presence, suddenly produces a bowl of something dark and thick. "Eat this, my children," she bellows. It's a fertility brew, probably made from mystery herbs and whatever bits of animal were left over from the feast. You grimace. You've already endured a feast, a sermon, and being paraded like a prize cow. Now this. You both take a reluctant sip, the concoction bitter and unappetizing. The crowd cheers. The pressure is immense. You are not just two people in a bed. You are a symbol, a public investment, and the future of the village depends on you. Joke number 3. If this brew works, you'll need a bigger cottage and a lot more chickens. Finally, after what feels like an eternity of uncomfortable staring and crude suggestions, a respected elder steps forward. She makes a final pronouncement, wishing you both fertility and prosperity, and then mercifully begins to shoo the crowd out. "Give them privacy," she commands, though it's clearly an afterthought. The mob, grumbling slightly, begins to shuffle out, their laughter and chatter slowly fading as they spill back into the night. The door creaks shut. Silence. A profound, echoing, almost deafening silence. You're alone with your new husband, the faint glow of the dying fire casting long shadows. The straw mattress rustles with every tiny movement. You're married. The bedding ceremony is over, and now the real medieval wedding night begins. You just hope that strange herbal brew wasn't too potent.